But first, as we always do, let's meet our screenwriter. And this one is one of the legends, Aaron Sorkin. He's 64 years old. He's a screenwriter, a playwright, a producer, now a director. You know about that. He's from New York, a New York guy through and through, youngest of three children. One of his siblings is a lawyer. The other is involved in the film industry somehow. I can't remember. And his mom was a teacher. His dad was a lawyer. He went to Syracuse in the 80s and he majored in theater, as a lot of our screenwriters do. He's fascinated in politics and history and sports, specifically baseball, my kind of guy. He's no longer married and he has a daughter, Roxy, who's 25 and also a filmmaker. So the family business. Sorkin's one of these screenwriters where I can't really tell you a whole lot about him that you don't already know. He's sort of like a Stephen King in the literary world. Everyone who cares knows quite a bit about him. One thing that he does that's sort of unique nowadays, is sort of old school, is he writes out the screenplay as much as possible by hand before he ever gets to the computer. Uses legal pads, spirals, all that stuff. And it goes all the way back to the beginning, and we'll talk about that in a second. He's an intense writer. He's a blue-collar, punch-in, punch-out, everyday type of guy. Hours and hours of writing when he's on a project. Known for his rapid-fire dialogue. Characters talk over each other constantly. They finish each other's sentences. They cross-talk, multiple conversations going on at once. That's on high display in this screenplay as well as pretty much everything else he's written. Think The West Wing. And you can think The West Wing because he wrote The West Wing. Or at least he was the creator and the showrunner for the first 4 seasons, I think. And then he stayed on board as a producer. He's known for his walk and talk scenes, a lot of one-ers where he's following people, picking up bits and pieces of conversations. Although, to be fair, there's not a whole lot of that in this screenplay because of the characters being anchored in these depositions where they're across the table from each other. But you can still feel the pace where the dialogue is going in different directions all over, just beep, 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 like, rapid fire stormtroopers. He's known for tackling moral, political, social themes that are basically character driven. If you break down his full filmography and televisionography, I don't even think that's a word, you would see that he is interested in some of the same themes as all writers have themes that show up over and over again in their particular work. His are power structure, the burden of leadership, the cost of being a genius, ambition, and integrity. And when you mix all that together, you can come up with some really interesting stories. All right, so how did he get started as a screenwriter? So it's the late 80s, and he's in his mid-20s, working as a bartender at a pretty fancy little restaurant somewhere in Manhattan. He gets a phone call. This is pre-cell phone, so it's tethered somewhere, and he's pouring a drink, talking on the phone. This is how I envision it, right? And it's his sister. And she's telling him about something she's going through personally. She is a JAG lawyer. She's defending Marines who are accused of killing other Marines in Guantanamo. Interesting story, right? Well, this sparks an idea. And he starts thinking about a story, a play. And he writes it down on napkins, cocktail napkins, pieces of scrap paper. This is the legend anyway. And so he's working night after night. Anytime he has a few seconds, he's scribbling things on pieces of paper. Maybe he's going home at the end of the night and compiling it into one of his famous yellow legal pads. But either way, in the end, he comes up with a play called A Few Good Men. Somehow this play ends up on Broadway and explodes. And it is one of the most seen plays down there for quite a while. 500 performances overall on Broadway. So this makes Aaron Sorkin a respected playwright, and it gained him Hollywood representation on the film side. And his first task as a writer for Hollywood was to adapt this famous play that everybody was going to see in New York. And that's how we're all gifted the 1992 film A Few Good Men, starring Jack Nicklaus, Tom Cruise, and Demi Moore. Of course, that launched his career in Hollywood for sure, and he followed it up quickly with another film that he co-wrote this time with Scott Frank. This was 1993, and it was Malice, a medical thriller starring Alec Baldwin, Nicole Kidman, Bill Pullman. 2 years later, back by himself as a writer, he wrote The American President, a romantic comedy drama starring Michael Douglas, Annette Bening. This one was directed by Rob Reiner, so some big hitters for sure, not that the other ones weren't. Then he got busy with television, and his first project in 1998 was to create a television show called Sports Night. And if you think back to 1998, this was the height of SportsCenter, and everyone was interested to see how that could translate to TV or film. And it was a great show, but I don't think it had enough viewers, probably female viewers at the time, although women love sports. I loved the show. I do remember it being very locker roomy though. And then that led to the 1999 project of being the creator and showrunner for The West Wing, one of the most beloved TV shows of the late 90s and early 2000s. And this really showed off Sorkin's style. Almost every episode was full of walk and talk, oneers, back and forth, multiple conversations, rapid speech, everyone talking over everyone else. Some of his characters had the same voice, but no one cared because it was so interesting, so intelligent, and the storylines were so tight. A very satisfying show. Not going to go into what all went down there, but he was running the show for 4 years and did, like I said earlier, stay on as a producer. And then he got back to the movies. In 2007, he wrote Charlie Wilson's War, which is an outstanding movie. And then followed that up in 2010 with The Social Network, which is the screenplay we're going to be breaking down today. Then he followed that up in 2011 with Moneyball, another great film and an outstanding screenplay. Maybe we'll break that one down one day. He had a co-writer on that one. That's based on the Michael Lewis book, Moneyball. Then back to TV for a few years. He did Newsroom, which was sort of a take between the Sports Night and the West Wing combined, and some brilliant acting in that show. Back to the big screen in 2015 with Steve Jobs, which if you remember at this time, there were multiple Steve Jobs films coming out. This one was the winner of the group. He won another Golden Globe for his screenplay. And then in 2017, he wrote and directed, this was his directorial debut, Molly's Game. That's a biopic about Molly Bloom. Then he did it again in 2020 with The Trial of the Chicago 7. He wrote and directed that one, which he also won another Golden Globe for. And just announced last week, the reason why we're breaking this film today, because we need to revisit it, because he is writing the sequel to The Social Network. Right now, the working title is The Social Network 2. I'm sure it'll be something different. But not only is he writing it, no Fincher this time. He's going to direct it. Some people are excited about that. If he has the whole project to himself, some people are like, whoa, wait a second. Part of the beauty of this film was the voice and the story of Sorkin and the camera and the structure on screen of Fincher. But we'll see how it turns out. I'm excited for it. It's going to be a huge movie, you can imagine. And then also, he's in talks to possibly write another biopic, this time Lyndon B. Johnson. So we'll see about that. So let's meet Ari Aster, 38 years old, a screenwriter from New York City. Comes from a family of artists like so many of our screenwriters and directors do. His mother was a poet. His father was a musician. He spent quite a bit of his childhood in New Mexico and some of it in England. He went to college at College of Santa Fe in New Mexico. Then he went to grad school, film school at AFI, the American Film Institute. And while he was in film school and even after film school, he was making a lot of short films. He made at least 8 of these provocative short films that became his calling card all over town, including one in 2011 called The Strange Thing About the Johnsons. And this was a story about family dysfunction and abuse. And it got people thinking, well, I think this guy could handle a feature film. Also in 2011, he did the short film Beau, which was the prototype for his feature film Beau Is Afraid with Joaquin Phoenix. That was his 3rd feature film, but it started out as a short, and we'll talk more about that later. But the most important thing to know about Ari Aster, if you only could know one thing, is that he is a writer and director who specializes in grief and trauma and guilt and death, family dysfunction, things that truly make us think about ourselves and our own lives. And he does this through the vehicle of horror, mostly occult. But he is a drama-first storyteller. And this is what I was talking about earlier. saying that he has pushed the horror genre in this direction. Now there are several horror filmmakers who are doing exactly what he's doing and having huge success with it. When he talks about his stories, he says the horror emerges organically from the emotional breakdown itself. His famous quote actually is, "I write drama that gets hijacked by horror." And you could feel that. You could see it on the page. You could see it on the screen. But he is never afraid to push the envelope, push the boundaries, put us in uncomfortable situations, not only visually, but also psychologically ourselves, thinking about things that you may not want to be thinking about. You have Jennifer Kent, you have Robert Eggers, you have Jordan Peele, and many others who are doing this, but using this horror vehicle to tell an emotionally philosophical, relevant story rather than just jump scares. It is what horror is today for most of us. So what about him? He is very private. We don't know much about him at all. Even when he is promoting a film, he doesn't really answer questions about himself. He pushes that away. He has said over time that he has experienced a lot of grief and pain and trauma from family trauma that's been passed down through his family. And you see that in all of his films. Also, he says he struggles with anxiety and OCD tendencies, which show up in a lot of his characters. So he is, as you could tell, one of my favorites. I respect him so much. And he's a very controversial screenwriter, filmmaker, because some people don't like his stuff at all. But that's why it's art. And we all can decide what it means to us and what we find out about it that is revealing something about ourselves. But for me and my family, he's the man. And he started with feature films in 2018, and Hereditary was his very first. That's the one we're going to be breaking down today. Then he followed that up in 2019 with Midsommar, starring Florence Pugh. This is my favorite of his collection. I call it the daylight horror because the whole thing is bright and beautiful. And of course, it's about this young woman, and she's coping with the loss of her sister and her parents as she attends a pagan festival. And then in 2023, he finally got to make Beau Is Afraid, starring Joaquin Phoenix. And this is a surreal story about an anxious man who's on a journey to visit his mother. And then, why this is so relevant, in a couple of weeks here, July 18th of this year, Eddington will be hitting the theaters. And it is a COVID-19 Western horror. So maybe he just made up a whole other genre. No one's ever heard of that before. But it has an all-star cast, including Joaquin Phoenix, Pedro Pascal, Emma Stone, Austin Butler, Luke Grimes, and many more. It's going to be something to see. And let's meet our writers, Greta Gerwig and Noah Baumbach. They're romantic and creative partners since the early 2010s. Got married in 2023, right before Barbie came out. And Barbie is their third screenplay together, but they've been on many, many projects together, different combinations of writer, director, actor, both known for heartfelt characters with sharp dialogue and deep themes. And so they're a great team, one of the best teams in Hollywood. And let's start with Noah Baumbach, 55 years old, from New York. His father was a novelist. His mother was a film critic. He has 3 children, 2 with Greta Gerwig. He has an English degree from Vassar. At 25 years old, he wrote his first feature screenplay. It was called Kicking and Screaming. It was a semi-autobiographical comedy about being aimless after college. Many of us know what that's like. He got the script to a friend who got it to another friend who got it to a producer named Joel Castleberg. That producer had connections at Trimark. Trimark read it. They liked it, and it was at the time where there was a lot of these small budget indie films being made about this sort of subject, and so they were like, let's do it. They greenlit it, and then, get this, they allowed him to direct it. A guy with no experience in the film business at all is now directing this project that he wrote, a true life-changing event. It made back its $1 million budget, and it gained high praise from the critics, and so now he's a known quantity in this small circle of Hollywood. And over the years, this movie has grown and grown and grown. It has one of these cult statuses. If you don't know about it, might want to check it out. And that opened the door for Baumbach, which led to other projects. He went on to write 2 more movies that didn't do as well And that led him to what he called a creative dark period. During that time of about 7 years, he was working mostly as a script doctor, working on other people's projects. He wrote a few TV pilots that didn't go anywhere. Then he was dealing with another personal tragedy, which gave him an idea. The great stories come from these things that happen to us as writers and have to get out. This was his parents divorcing and him being a young adult and not knowing how to handle that. And so he wrote the screenplay, The Squid and the Whale. This starred Jeff Daniels, and this was Jesse Eisenberg's breakout role. He was just a kid in this movie. And Noah Baumbach was nominated for an Oscar for Best Original Screenplay for this film. And so he's back on the horse. He won awards at Sundance and at Gotham. It made over 7 times its production budget, so a huge success, this movie. That led to his 2007 film, Margot at the Wedding, starring Nicole Kidman. And then, in 2009, he was directing his next screenplay called Greenberg, and he was impressed with an actor who was making a huge splash on the mumblecore indie scene. I'll explain what that is in a minute. And that was Greta Gerwig. And she was cast as the female opposite of Ben Stiller in this movie, which was a success. And they began a personal relationship and then have gone on to do 4 more films together in some combination. And their careers together have been a huge success, but they also do their own projects individually. And those are also huge successes, including his 2019 film, Marriage Story, starring Adam Driver and Scarlett Johansson. For that, he received another Oscar nomination for Best Original Screenplay. So 2 powerhouses. Individually, they are mighty. Together, they are pretty much unstoppable. Let's meet Greta Gerwig. She's 41 years old from Sacramento, California. Her mom's a nurse. Her dad works at a bank. Her parents encouraged her at a young age to pursue her passion of the arts and of writing and putting on skits and putting on plays. In fact, she would write skits and write plays and then hand out the scripts to her parents and assign roles to them, and they had to perform. Sounds like really good parents. She went on to get an English and philosophy degree from Barnard College, where she was a roommate at the time with Kate McKinnon of SNL fame, who also played Weird Barbie in the movie. We have a Weird Barbie in this house, too. This isn't one of them. I should have brought that one out. Here it is. Here's our Weird Barbie. Not quite like Kate McKinnon's weird, but a little weird. We had to cut her hair because she had a lot of goo in it. So toward the end of college and after college, she stumbled into the mumblecore movement. I told you, I'd tell you what that is if you don't know. It's these low-budget, early 2000 films that were all about the same sort of topic. Young adults navigating life and love and identity, trying to find out who they are. Basically, it was a spotlight on people my age, so it's exactly my age, leaving college and trying to figure out how to become an adult. So apparently a lot of people like me were watching these films. I remember watching quite a few of them, thought they were cool. It was known for this like natural dialogue and awkward social interactions and a lot of improv. You know, it'd be like, you guys are going to sit in the kitchen, you're going to argue about this topic, and at the end we want to get to this conclusion, go. And there's a lot of scripted stuff too, but it was a lot of straight to DVD type movies. Today it would be streaming. But the person who was crowned by critics and magazines as the it girl of mumblecore, I see why they did that. That rhymes. It girl of mumblecore was Greta Gerwig. She has this quality to her as an actor where she's very grounded, very like someone you would meet at a coffee shop, at the PTO meeting, but she still is a movie star, you know, like she's like the perfect version of, I don't want to say the girl next door because that's got a different connotation, the neighbor or the best friend, like someone who's really in your life. She brings that to the screen, and that's why she was amazing in these films. In 2007, she co-wrote and starred in Hannah Take the Stairs. In 2008, she co-directed and starred in Nights and Weekends. But then she moves over to mainstream acting, and who's the first person who casts her in a mainstream Hollywood film? Her now husband, Noah Baumbach. She broke in with Greenberg. That's the film with Ben Stiller. She went on to do 8 movies as an actor, including the animated film Isle of Dogs, To Rome with Love. That's the Woody Allen film. Jackie with Natalie Portman. No Strings Attached with Ashton Kutcher and Natalie Portman again. She also wrote and co-directed several films during that time. But then, 2017, Lady Bird. Her first solo screenwriting and her solo directorial debut, and it was a tremendous movie. It's an autobiographical coming-of-age story about a young woman and her mother, so about her and her mother. She became the first woman nominated for Best Director at the Oscars in 8 years, and only the 5th ever at any time. Lady Bird was also nominated for Best Picture and Best Original Screenplay, and it won a Golden Globe for Best Comedy, a budget of $10 million, and it made $80 million. That's a lot of money for a movie like that. In 2019, she wrote and directed the adaptation of Louisa May Alcott's novel, Little Women. 6 Academy Award nominations for that one, including Best Picture and Best Adapted Screenplay. It grossed $218 million. And then in 2023, Barbie, she co-wrote that one with Baumbach. She became the first female director to lead a film beyond $1 billion. Wow. I just realized this saying it out loud, but every screenplay that she has written or co-written and then gone on to direct, that screenplay was nominated for an Academy Award. The true talent of Greta Gerwig as a screenwriter, and again, we don't want to leave Baumbach out of this one because he gets huge credit for Barbie. In fact, she gives him tons of credit. But when you look at her other screenplays, Lady Bird in particular, and also Little Women, the action lines are written in the voice of the characters that are driving the scene. That's something you don't see very often. You could see it when it's a character-driven screenplay and someone gets locked into that voice, locked into that tone. But she is constantly switching it depending on who's driving the scene. So what's next for Greta Gerwig? Netflix. Netflix paid high 9 figures for the rights to the Narnia franchise, and they're going to make some films and spend a ton of money, and she is going to write and direct those films. She is working on the first one now, which is going to start filming pretty soon. It's going to have a $200 million budget, and just announced this week that this is the first film that Netflix is going to put out in theaters for 2 weeks before it comes on Netflix. The rule is for a film to be nominated in award season, it has to have a theatrical release. But a theatrical release is defined as being in at least one theater and showing at least once a day for 7 days in a row. So this is what Netflix has been doing, picking a couple of theaters, giving it 7 showings and pulling it, putting it on. I mean, they paid for it. It makes sense. They want it to be on their service mostly. But then that makes it eligible for award season. This one, though, they're going to put out in more theaters and for 2 weeks. And then they're going to pull it. And then on Christmas Day, 2026, you'll be watching it on Netflix for the first or second time. So let's meet Zach Cregger, 44 years old, from Virginia. He went to college in New York at the New York City School of Visual Arts, where he got a degree in film. He's married to Sarah Paxton, the actor. Started an improv group in high school, and they were so well known and popular that they stuck together. And then in early college years, they won huge awards for their improv. In fact, they won the 2006 Aspen Comedy Arts Festival for Best Sketch Comedy Group. There were several people in the group, but Zach and his very good friend Trevor Moore were 2 of the main players. The name of that sketch group was The Whitest Kids You Know. And they went on to have a TV career. They had a TV show from 2007 to 11 on both the Fuse Network and IFC. So maybe you saw some of their sketches. And this started landing Zach some acting gigs. He first appeared on TV in the series Homicide, Life on the Streets. He also appeared on Friends with Benefits in 2011, Guys with Kids in 2012, and he was on the TV series Wrecked for several years. But his first writing and directing credits are for the movie Miss March in 2009. He co-wrote that, co-directed it. It's a raunchy sex comedy from that same sketch group. And it had horrible reviews, less than 3% on Rotten Tomatoes. He followed that up in 2011 with The Civil War on Drugs, which is exactly what it sounds like, with this sort of absurd comedy about a bunch of young kids who think that the Civil War is being fought to legalize weed. It's like a period piece. Also didn't do well with critics. And then around 2020, 2021, he decided he wanted to write something on his own, and he was fascinated with this concept of ignoring red flags, like getting yourself into a bad situation, knowing you're in a bad situation, and then just keep going, and then you have to try to get yourself out. He had no outline. This is how he writes. He has an idea, and he just sort of puts scenes together. This happens, which causes this to happen, and then he sees if he can get out of it. This is his style. And this script is what would eventually become Barbarian, the 2022 hit. Cregger sent it to his agent, then they got it to a junior executive over at Vertigo. That's Roy Lee's company, big time. But once Lee was involved and it went around town, everybody wanted to be a part of it. So it kept getting a little more budget. Ended up having $4.5 million, and that was enough money to get some pretty decent actors. Bill Skarsgård, for one. That was a huge success. It made $45 million at the box office. And then since leaving the box office, it's become even more popular. It's one of these horror word-of-mouth movies. Like, have you seen Barbarian? In fact, when you go to generals around town, at least for a while, that's what everybody wanted to know. Do you have the next Barbarian? Have anything like Barbarian? So very popular. So you can imagine everyone was like on pins and needles waiting for the next project. What's he going to do? What can we make with Zach Cregger? And there were a couple of things that almost happened. For one, and we explored this weeks ago when we broke down the screenplay for Companion by Drew Hancock. He and Drew are friends. And the original hookup here was that Cregger was going to direct Drew's script for Companion. But the story goes that Zach saw that Drew was so passionate about it and didn't want anything to get in the way of their friendship, and they had different visions for the script. So he suggested that Drew direct it. Drew had no directorial experience, and it all worked out. And Drew wrote an amazing script and a tremendous movie with Companion, and Zach Cregger moved on. And that allowed space for him to do his next film, which is Weapons. And that's the one we're breaking down today. The Resident Evil franchise are going to do a new adaptation of that video game. He's writing that now and set to direct it. September of next year, possibly, is when it's coming out. He's also written a DC World screenplay about henchmen. You know, the guys who just like die all the time. So that could be very interesting. And also he's open to a sequel to Weapons and has some ideas, he says. So we'll see what's next. So how was Weapons written and developed? Well, remember his friend that I mentioned earlier, Trevor Moore? He passed away in 2021. And Zach says he needed a channel for his grief, a creative outlet. Not that the story was at all about his friend, Trevor, but that he wanted to put that pain and that grief into something. And that's what started this screenplay. He went back to his storytelling style of multiple POVs, nonlinear structure, and he just amped it up this time. He credits Magnolia and The Shining as inspiration. In fact, the 217, where the kids leave, they all leave at 217, and there's 17 kids and 2 people who are left over. He credits that to The Shining because you remember the room in The Shining was room 217. And Cregger says he started writing the screenplay. He had no idea where it was going for the first 50 pages. He was just had an interesting hook. He kept writing, and then when he figured it out, he knew he really had something. So he completes the script, and it goes out to market January 22nd, 2023. And within hours, he has multiple offers. The next morning, even more offers. And the winning bid is Warner Brothers. They sign on for $38 million production budget plus $10 million directly going to Cregger for writing, directing, and producing. And one of the production companies that was bidding on it and missed out was Monkey Paw Production. That's Jordan Peele's company. Peele was obsessed with this script and wanted to make this movie so bad, it's said that he was willing to pay money out of his own pocket above Monkey Paw for whatever it took to get it. And his agents and his team didn't make that happen. He was very upset about that. And it's said that that was contributed to the fact of him firing his agent. So this was a popular script. A lot was happening very fast. And now we have Weapons. Pre-production began in early 2023 with the major casting announcements, including Pedro Pascal was going to be the lead in this. Then the strikes hit and everything got pushed back. And by the time the strikes resolved, Pascal couldn't do it because he had these other commitments that he had had previously. So they had to find a new lead male actor, and they cast Josh Brolin in the role. And then when they did that, you know how it is. It's like when you have a new person, you have to go back and look at all the other characters or actors and see the chemistry. So they ended up recasting everybody except for one person. So a whole new cast. And principal photography began May to July 2024 around Atlanta, although the film is actually set in Pennsylvania. Part of the filming took place at a real school. So Maybrook Elementary is an actual elementary school. It's actually Brockett Elementary in Tucker, Georgia. And then post-production amped up early this year with a 37-track score composed for the film. And the soundtrack for that was just released just last week along with the film. And the world premiere was right in Los Angeles in July. And then it hit your theater July 31st, I think. Maybe it was August, early August. It was just like last week. So this is fresh, hot off the press. It seems like my genre, the horror, especially the psychological type horrors, was saving movie theaters. I mean, it's like they're really putting people in the seats. But first, let's meet the writer, Dan Fogelman, 49 years old, from New Jersey. Wow, he is our fourth screenwriter that we've broken down from New Jersey. So it's a good state to be born in if you want to be a screenwriter. But I say I'm from Texas. Trey Edward Schultz, I got you, yeah. So it doesn't really matter, but isn't that interesting? There's a lot of literary folks up in that part of the country, a lot of great colleges, so it does make sense. Fogelman says that his parents had a huge impact on his writing and his career, says that his late mother shows up a lot in the tone of his writing, especially in This Is Us. He wrote a movie actually about a road trip that he and his mother took, and we'll get to that one in a minute. But he went on to college at Penn, where he studied English literature, and that included a year abroad at Oxford, where he sat around and sipped tea and read the classics. He is married to Caitlin Thompson, who played Madison on This Is Us. They've been together for 10 plus years. They have a young son. Moved to Los Angeles at age 20 and began working as a PA on the Howie Mandel Show. And his first writing gig was doing 60-second blurbs for the TV Guide Network. Remember that channel? During his time, he was also working on a comedy screenplay about a bar mitzvah, which was never produced, but it did land him representation. And it was his manager who got him a meeting with John Lasseter at the new development Pixar. And John and his team were so impressed with young Dan that they offered him a 2-week contract to work on a top secret script to see what he could come up with. It turned out to be a screenplay about a racing car. And apparently they liked it because that led to a 2-year project of him writing and developing what eventually would become the film Cars. So think about this. Before the age 30, he went from one spec script to writing a movie that made over $500 million at the box office. And I looked this up, has brought in over $12 billion in merchandise. So Dan Fogelman's off to a good start, we can say. And that led to a 2007 screenplay that he wrote called Fred Claus, which was his first live action. It was a comedy starring Vince Vaughn. 2008, Pixar said, come on back. So he wrote the film Bolt for them. He also voiced one of the characters in that. Then in 2010, Pixar and Disney together, a match made in heaven. And he wrote Tangled for Disney Pixar. 2011, he showed us his first touch of the rom-com with the film Crazy Stupid Love, starring Ryan Gosling, Emma Stone, Steve Carell, and a bunch of other stars. That one made a lot of money and continues to do very well. Even 14 years later, it's a very streamed movie. 2012, he wrote The Guilt Trip. That's the Barbra Streisand, Seth Rogen film. And that's the screenplay that's based off of a real life road trip that he took with his mom. So he and his late mother obviously had a very hilarious relationship. 2013, he continued with comedy, doing the film Las Vegas with Morgan Freeman, Michael Douglas, and others. Also during that time is when he started his transition over to television. He got his first opportunity to be a creator and a showrunner, and he created the show The Neighbors. It was on ABC, 44 episodes, so 2 seasons. That's part of the Disney universe. And it was set in New Jersey. It was about a family that moves to a neighborhood, and all of their neighbors are aliens. He dabbled in some other shows. He wanted to direct. He got an opportunity to direct an Al Pacino film. And then in 2018 was the first time that he wrote and directed a feature, and that one was Life Itself, an ensemble family drama with a lot of laughter and tears, the sort of appetizer for what was to come. And the main course, This Is Us. 6 seasons, 106 episodes on NBC, a show that truly redefined network television dramas for this emotionally rich, non-linear storytelling with deep, relatable characters, themes of grief and identity and mental health. It was truly the right show at the right time for all of us. For my family, it was very special because that was when my son Curry moved out to LA. One of his first big breaks was working on that show for a couple of seasons, did various things, PA type stuff, and he ended up being a regular extra on the show where he was in every episode for 2 seasons, where it was like a game of Where's Waldo. We would watch every week. Oh, there he is. Oh, there he is. Sometimes it'd be like a gigantic tight shot of him, and sometimes it'd just be a blur, but we'd recognize his hair. So it was really fun. In fact, I can announce this now because it just came out yesterday. His film Obsession is premiering at the Toronto International Film Festival this year. Super excited about that as part of their fun Midnight Madness series where they really, everybody's in the theater having a great time. It's the world premiere. Couldn't be more proud, obviously. I'll be there. So if any of you are there, please say hi. Love to meet you. But we're thrilled to death and super proud. So if you were paying attention, you noticed that all of the shows and the films and Fogelman's library, they're all Pixar, ABC. So they're all in this one universe, right? Well, wait a second, though. This Is Us was on NBC. So how is that possible? Now, actually, This Is Us was produced by 20th Century Fox, which Fox is part of the Disney universe, and licensed to NBC to play on their network. This happens a lot in television. NBC was paying 20th Century Fox $2 to $3 million per episode for a one-time airing, and then 20th Century Fox retains the rights to the show for all of streaming and all of that stuff. In fact, that's why it's on Hulu. TV is a wild business. It's the Wild West. There's dollar bills flying all over the place. I think, though, what happened was 20th Century Fox decided we need to put a ring on it. This guy's making us a killing. So in 2019, they signed Dan Fogelman to an overall deal, a 5-year deal for $125 million. So that's not bad. So it was time to put him to work. And the first thing they attached him to was to the new show being developed by Steve Martin and John Hoffman, which is Only Murders in the Building. He helped them develop that as an executive producer, very involved with a lot of the themes and the weaving storylines. That's the show on Hulu, that has Selena Gomez, Martin Short, Steve Martin. 7 Emmy wins for that show, 49 Emmy nominations, 16 Golden Globe nominations, very successessul. So 20th Century Fox was like, okay, good, what's next? So he starts working on this show, Paradise. He was obviously the creator, the showrunner of this. He's credited as the writer for the pilot, obviously, also another episode. And then his overall deal expired a couple of months ago. So he's currently not under contract, but he is working on season 2 of Paradise, thank goodness. Also creating an NFL drama series for Fox So that's also in the family. So something tells me it'll all work out. What's the over-under on how many episodes it takes for Dan Fogelman's quarterback to cry? I'm going pilot right off the bat.